Hey guys, welcome back to the Calibrate Tools and DIY channel. Summer is the best time to do 3 home improvement projects. Let's find out what they are. See you right after this. All right, summertime is one of the best times of the year to start any kind of home improvement project. The weather is good. It's not as unpredictable as the other seasons, especially when it comes to exterior outdoor work. Whether you're going to repaint your house, do some landscaping, a million other things you can do outside, the summertime is the best time. One great thing about the summertime is that the days are longer, which means you have more time to accomplish the tasks that you set out to do, whether it's building a deck, doing some roof repair, and even if you're working indoors, let's say you're painting the interior. That extra daylight, that extra heat gives the paint more time to dry. The summertime is when most people take a vacation, which means more hands on deck. Now, when it comes to planning and preparing your renovation projects, you can't beat the summertime. Simply because there's more free time available. You can take the time to research contractors, compare quotes, and get as detailed as you want as far as planning out the project. Which means that your project will most likely be on time, within your budget, and the results will be what you want. But given all those benefits that you get from renovating in the summer, there are a couple of things you got to keep in mind when it comes to performing certain renovation projects. For example, painting. In the summer, paint dries very fast, which is a good thing, but it also can be a bad thing. So to make sure that your paint dries correctly in that summer heat, here's what to consider. When you're painting outside in the summer, it's best to avoid temperatures above 95 degrees Fahrenheit. You should also avoid painting in direct sunlight. Basically, you should not be painting on a hot surface. In either of those conditions, you should not be painting. You see, if it's too hot outside, the paint will have a hard time properly binding to the exterior of the house, and you'll end up with a lot of cracking and peeling. So make sure that you check the labels on the cans of paint that you choose. They have specific temperature guides on those. But generally, the perfect outdoor painting temperature is around 70 degrees. And also, if you live in high humidity areas, that humidity is definitely going to affect the amount of time the paint takes to dry or cure. So make sure you check the weather forecast and look for a good stretch of time where there won't be any fluctuations in the weather. In other words, look for a good stretch of clear weather so you won't have to start and stop all the time. As far as that goes, look for around 50% humidity. That's ideal for outdoor painting. Now here's another tip the summertime helps you to do, and that's prepping your house before painting. And that involves rinsing your house off and letting the sun dry it. And the reason you want to do this is because you want to get rid of any mold or mildew that's accumulated on the surface of your house. And the summertime is the best time for this. So what you want to do is spray your house with some kind of solution, preferably a diluted bleach solution. Then you want to take your hose and rinse it off. You don't want to use a power washer because they can be too powerful and eat right into the wood of your house or even chip off some of the concrete. Then you want to wait a few days after rinsing it before you start painting. So in this case, the hotter it is, the faster it dries. Here's something else to think about when painting. As I said before, you don't want to paint in direct sunlight. That's not only good for the paint, but it's also good for you in the summer. So you want to start painting on the side of the house with the most shade. Then you want to follow that shade as the sun moves across the sky. So this keeps you a little cooler, and it also keeps the surface of the house a little cooler for that paint to stick to properly, so you can avoid all that cracking and peeling we spoke of before. Now, if you have a lot of plants and greenery on your property, they're going to bloom the fullest and brightest in the summertime, which means all those flowers are going to be at full blossom. What color are those flowers? You want to make sure that the color of your house matches the rest of your property. Now, that's not set in stone, but there's always that neighbor that's going to complain about everything, right? Even the color of your house. Okay, so now that that's taken care of, it's time to check that other portion of the house that often gets neglected until it's too late, and that's the roof. The summer is a great time to do maintenance on your roof, but it's also when the roof can become the most damaged because of the heat and all the other elements. Well, before we talk about checking your roof, make sure that you're safe. If you don't feel safe getting on a roof, just hire a professional. So you want to check the roof surface for any damage or any cracks, missing shingles, or holes. If you see any stains or mold growth, that could be a sign of water damage, which you need to fix right away. Check the flashing for any wear and tear. Any of the stacks or ventilation systems, check around those as well. And lastly, check the gutters and downspouts and make sure they're in good condition. If you got a lot of trees or even just one big tree on your property, you're guaranteed to have leaves piling up in your gutters or in low spots on the roof. Make sure you clean those out. In this case, a pressure washer is not a bad idea. Just be careful not to use too much pressure because you don't want to destroy or damage the good shingles. And if you have any overhanging branches from those trees, make sure you trim those too. It's good to carry a piece of chalk to circle and identify any damaged areas or shingles on the roof. That way you'll remember where they are when you go back to replace them with new shingles. You may have to apply some sealant or waterproof the roof, especially if you live in areas where storms are frequent. Just make sure all the seams, all the joints are properly sealed, and slap on a second or third coat if you have to. They even have waterproof membranes that you can put under your shingles before you apply them, so you may want to think about that option. If you find that your gutters are in bad shape, replace them if need be. Sometimes gutters also need sealant. Okay, so we covered some major aspects of the house, but what about the rest of the property? Yeah, the grass, the trees, the plants, and all of that. Your landscape can mean the difference between beautiful and not so beautiful. So when you're talking about watering your lawn, for instance, you don't want to overwater it and you don't want to underwater it either. Either of those extremes can kill your grass or your plants. So here's a couple of guidelines. For your lawns, you want to aim for about 1 inch of water per week, including rain. This is assuming you have an irrigation system of some sort like sprinklers. And if you don't, I would suggest you invest in a good sprinkler system, especially if you have a lot of property. If you have potted plants or hanging plants, you definitely got to make sure they're watered more than once a day, especially in the summer. If there's a heat wave going on, you definitely want to move those plants into the shade. What's the best time to water your lawn or plants? In the early morning, before everything heats up. And make sure that you don't just superficially water them. You want to make sure that water reaches the roots. That's about 6 inches down. It's easy to tell if a plant needs water because it starts to wilt, but you don't want it to get to that point, right? If you're really serious about your landscaping, you would at least get familiar with your soil type. Yeah, they got different soil types. They got clay soil, they got sandy soil, and each of those types require a different amount of water. So if you got something planted in sandy soil, you're going to need more water than something planted in clay soil. When you're talking about garden beds or shrubs, you may want to invest in a drip irrigation system rather than a sprinkler system. That way you know the water's getting right to the roots of the plants. Now, of course, I can't talk about landscaping without talking about weeds. That's the most obvious problem when it comes to landscaping. You got to pluck those weeds, because if you don't, those things can grow as tall as you. I'm sure you've seen those yards where the weeds are almost as tall as the roof. I'm exaggerating, but if allowed to take over, weeds will destroy everything in its path. So you got to pluck those things out. It's better to get them when they're small, and if it comes down to it, just get some herbicide to get them under control. After you get that weed problem taken care of, make sure your lawn and plants are properly fed. How do you feed them? Well, fertilizer. Matter of fact, fertilizer helps to prevent weeds from sprouting again. It also helps your plant and lawn to deal with that summer heat. How often should you apply fertilizer? They say about 4 times a year, and you should apply it in the evening when the weather is warm for the best benefits. There's another culprit that may be the enemy of your landscape, and that's bugs. But what's the enemy of bugs? Birds. Maybe that's why some people have bird houses. For that very reason. Try not to keep standing water nearby where bugs can breed, or invest in some bug traps or insect repellent if the bugs are starting to take over. Clip those hedges to get rid of the old growth or the dead parts. But you don't want to cut it too much, or what they call over pruning. That's the other extreme, and that can kill the plant, so you don't want to do that either. If you're curious about what mulch does, mulch is great for controlling the soil temperature and retaining water in the ground, which in turn is good for your plants and flower beds. And if you can't move delicate plants into the shade, like I mentioned before, you might have to bring the shade to them. That can be anything that provides shade, so you can get creative with that one. One more tip on that lawn. Mow the lawn high. Most homeowners mow the lawn too low. When you cut the lawn too short, you make it more prone to heat damage from the sun. So you should mow it no lower than 3 inches. Good thing about this is that you don't need extra fertilizer because the grass clippings from the mowing helps to fertilize the grass. That's why it's recommended that you don't rake it up. You leave the grass clippings on the grass. They'll eventually decompose and the organic matter will provide nutrients for your lawn. So you're really mowing your lawn and fertilizing it at the same time. Not to mention it's good to keep the weeds down.